My name's Farhad Divecha. I'm the Managing Director of Accuracast. We're a search and social media marketing agency based in London. Is social media something that big brands do well? That's pretty much up for debate. There are a number of big brands that do social media really well. There's Starbucks, Dell, Coca-Cola, and a whole bunch of other American brands that do social media really well. And there are a few key points that are common to each of these brands that do it really in a good way. The first and foremost thing is that they engage their audience. They are able to reach out and not just ask the stupid and mundane questions like how are you doing today or talking about the weather, but they're actually able to talk to the audience about what they like about the brand, what they're doing well, their in-shop experience, and so on and so forth. Another thing that they do very well is give the audience a reason to interact. So they're engaging them, but they're not leaving it at that. They're then taking it a step forward, telling the audience, here's what you'll get for interacting with my brand. Like me, visit me often, talk to me about it, and I'll give you 10% off. Keep following me on Twitter and I'll give you a special discount, so on and so forth. And that obviously keeps bringing the people back to the brand page or the brand's Twitter stream or any other social platform that the brand is using. And the third and most important fact that they're using is they dedicate resource to the whole social media sphere. They've not got a page up there and then just letting it flow. They've not decided, let's advertise on social media and just let that run. What they do is dedicate resource, have people taking the time to read each and every person's comments, or at least bunches of comments, respond to them, moderate the page, make sure that what's being said about the brand is always good. If there are negative points, answer them, deal with them in an appropriate manner. And that is one of the most important things that any good, successful social media strategy should involve. I singled out Tesco in the article because they're quite a well-known brand, and if you look at their US counterpart Target, they have a really good social media strategy. They've got target pages for individual verticals as well as for the brand overall. Tesco, on the other hand, had Tesco clothing in retail for a bit, and only last week they actually managed to launch a Tesco branded Facebook page. Now, while they've gone ahead and done this and they've forayed into the space, Tesco is still a very interesting case study to look at. Tesco, the official page, has got about 8,000 likes. There is an unofficial Tesco page which was created by some user, consumer, fan somewhere a while ago, and that one has about 75,000 likes. And if you look at that page in itself tells a story about why Tesco should have done this earlier. The majority of comments and posts on that page are about shelves not being stocked. There's a whole lot of spam. There's people bickering about prices rising, petrol prices, shelf item prices, specials going on Tesco, some people being excited about them, some people saying, you have a special, but you actually don't have any stock on that special. And what that tells us is, whether or not Tesco had that official page, people would have bickered about it and people would have spammed the page. Tesco not creating the page has ended up having somebody else create it and create a forum for them. What Tesco probably should have done much earlier is embrace that. Because of all of this, which is anyways happening, that Tesco probably held back and said, should we go ahead and launch right now? Do we have the manpower? Do we have the resources to deal with such a big volume of comments and posts and spam on a daily basis? And that is probably what held them back, to the point where for each and every brand, it probably comes to a breaking point when they go, okay, we need to take this in-house and control it before it just gets too big and too far. There is also the fear that if they do it and they get it wrong, we have so many of these classic examples like Southwest Airlines and whatever else, people who do it wrong, Apple saying that you hold your iPhones wrong, and that becomes a big hubbub on the blogosphere. All of those things can go so badly wrong that brands who haven't jumped into that space suddenly start thinking, A, we don't have the resource to dedicate to it, and if we do it and we get it spectacularly wrong, we're ending up hurting ourselves much more than we're doing good for the brand. There's brands who they can't make a very obvious case for social media. Easy examples to think of are the legal profession, construction industry, blue collar worker type of brands where you don't typically expect to have to deal with construction industries on Facebook, for example, or want to have to deal with them even. Same way you don't necessarily want to like lawyers. And those ones are easy targets where you'd say, okay, social media is just not right for them. Then there are your regular brands and things like banks or financial services kick in or they come to mind immediately. And the first thing you think about is nobody's going to like a bank. And my response to that typically is if somebody can like the vendor of a gassy drink in a can, why on earth would you not like the person who helps you set up your own business, helps you buy your home, helps you secure your mortgage? I mean, those are much more integral parts to our life. And if banks did their job well, if they weren't evil, if the bank's customer service reps actually helped people and were genuinely positive about the whole experience, I think there's a much better case for people liking and interacting with those brands than there is for people liking something like Coca-Cola. When you ask me about social media and banks, I can't think of anyone that does it beautifully, but at the same time, there is a lot of good advertising that is done by banks, and I can't help but think they could leverage that. The HSBC campaign about differences in people, if they leveraged it and put it on social media, I think it has legs to run, but they haven't really done that noticeably. Where brands are worried about how their reputation will get impacted through social media work, the easy answer is just don't be evil. Do everything right and nothing will go wrong. But then realistically speaking, that obviously is not going to happen. Things go wrong, people will gripe about businesses, whether or not they deserve to be griped about. What brands need to understand is that whether or not they invade the social media space, people will find their own ways to go and gripe if they have to. People are going to complain, they'll set up their own blogs, they'll set up their own Facebook pages, and then it just kind of runs loose and people will become fans of that gripe or blog and they will contribute and make matters worse. What brands need to do is embrace this. A classic example that I think about is DFS, the sofa brand. If you look for DFS sofas on Facebook, you can find dozens of Facebook groups, Facebook pages of people either laughing at the never-ending sale that DFS has or talking about how their adverts are really irritating. There's very little positive brand mention, and it's happening. Thousands of people are viewing those on a daily basis, contributing to them, and it's just running wild. My advice to a brand like DFS or any other brand out there who's being impacted by such social media negativity is to embrace it. You have to take it in-house. You have to give the fans as well as the haters a place to come, an official place to come and voice their feelings, voice their gripes, voice their grievances, and then the brand can control it. And when I say control it, I don't mean moderate and delete out comments. What I mean is respond to it in a sensible, meaningful fashion, rather than just having a whole bunch of other fans join in and go, oh yes, I had the same problem. You have two comments that are negative, you can immediately address them when it's your own Facebook page. And you have one centralized point where you control all of that. It is about showing that you're willing to fix your mistakes, but it's also about being able to track and control what you're doing wrong. If you have 1,000 different groups and 1,000 different venues where people go and voice their grievances, it becomes a much bigger Herculean task almost to control all of that than if you have one specific place which you've promoted and you've pushed as your space, and people will normally then come and voice their grievances out there. So brands shouldn't be afraid of people voicing their grievances. What they should be afraid of is people doing it in a runaway fashion willy-nilly everywhere. When you talk about monetization of social media or doing well on social media, there are a lot of different parameters that you can consider. If you're talking of direct monetization, driving footfall into a store, then local social networks, places like Foursquare, even things like Groupon, Living Social, Facebook Deals, and Facebook Places, they do beautifully for small local businesses. It's a great way to drive traffic and footfall into a small coffee shop or even a chain of coffee shops. If you're thinking of branding, then your big FMCG brands and your luxury goods, they do brilliantly with your usual YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, those sort of social networks, because they're just big platforms, lots of users, lots of time spent on there, and these brands get lots of exposure on there. And if you then think about the overall aspect, monetization as well as interaction and giving an overall positive experience to your consumer base, I think there's no industry that does it as well as the entertainment industry. Social media it's kind of like an elixir for artists and their fan base. It's taking the fan club that you had in the 80s to a whole new level. In some ways, people almost worry that you've eliminated middlemen to an extent, because people like Lady Gaga can reach out to their fan base, talk to them. Movie producers can talk directly to the people who are going to go and fill in the seats in the cinemas. And then you have this whole phenomenon of artists such as Justin Bieber, who actually got discovered on places like YouTube. So the entertainment industry definitely has it down to pat. MySpace started off being a lot about what Facebook wanted to be. It got overtaken very quickly by venues and artists trying to push it, which in some ways was a great thing because it sowed the seeds for what Facebook does now for artists, but it was also part of the demise of MySpace. There were far too many people just promoting things and far too many structures and how you could do things, how you could not do things. The Atlantic divide between how UK companies embrace social media and US companies embrace social media is quite an interesting one. There isn't a definite answer as to this is why, but if one were to ask me, I'd think of two main reasons. One, it's cultural, and while that sounds flippant and an easy answer, it is actually quite core to why American companies who have a historically different customer service culture are much happier to embrace social media as yet another way to interact with customers versus UK companies who have historically been nationalized and only very recently have opened up to a lot of competition and become privatized. They typically do not have the same customer service culture in them, and so the idea of reaching out to your customers, talking to them, interacting with them, responding to their grievances is much more of an obvious thing for American companies and much less for the UK companies. So that could be one pretty important factor. Another factor is just the fact that a lot of these networks are American. They started in the USA. They have much bigger consumer bases in terms of absolute numbers in the USA. And so there's a much bigger driving force for companies in the USA to want to embrace those. Whereas in the UK, they're obviously imports. They're coming in once they've gained popularity already. In the USA, they might or might not work with the UK public, and the absolute numbers are also relatively smaller. So there's much less of a driving force pushing UK companies to adapt those. Will 2011 be the year of social commerce? I always laugh when companies in the industry typically coin these phrases. I'm sure the past 5 years I've heard of at least someone or the other claiming it was the year of mobile. And I think, like mobile, social commerce is not going to have a step change. It's not going to go from nothing to everything overnight or over the space of a year. People have already started monetizing social media. Social commerce is alive and well in formats that are very different from what we know currently. But it's still out there. Brands are using social media in very specific ways. They're being innovative. They're reaching out to new audiences. And they're doing lots of fun and very different things. And monetizing all of those efforts at the end of the day. Brilliant example, Dell has basically created a brand new channel for itself on Twitter. A whole lot of other companies like Overstock.com also have gone and used that medium very differently than some of the other brands treated it. And I think with social commerce, what will happen is it'll evolve. There'll be a continuous innovation, a continuous degree of innovation in the market. There will be people using it in different ways, different companies trying to figure out what's right and what's the best way for them to use it. And it'll evolve gradually so that over the next 3 to 4 years, we will see more and more and more and more varied varieties of social commerce applications happening. I've read statistics somewhere about Dell making millions of dollars on their Twitter channel by basically offering special deals to that Twitter channel. So Dell's one example. There are a whole bunch of other examples. Facebook being used to be directly monetized is a very difficult one right now to track, because there are a lot of small brands that use Facebook stores and Facebook commerce and are doing it well, but big brands using it is not happening at the same level. What is interesting though is how a lot of smaller companies have grown up suddenly on the back of Facebook apps and monetizing Facebook applications and Facebook currencies and things like that. And while they're all small individually, their sum total does amount to a few millions of revenue being generated in a space that didn't exist a few years ago.